Thank you. Then we'll begin. Welcome to the first community call for the Internet of Production Alliance for 2023. And I'm delighted to see so many people here. Good luck to everybody for 2023. I think it's going to be a good year for the Internet of Production, for the members of the Alliance and for the Alliance itself and for our work. There's a lot happening, and we're going to be talking today about one of the main agenda points of the meeting is talking about some of the people and skills and what's been termed the Maker Passport. So you'll be hearing a lot about that. That's going to be developing over the course of the next 12 months. But I'd like to begin just by giving you a few updates about what we're doing at the Alliance. You see the link on the screen there, and that is where you can make some notes. We're going to be making notes in here, but everyone is invited to contribute if there's something you'd like to particularly remember or refer back to. If you have any questions, there is a section on the community notes for the questions, and but you can also just put questions in the chat, and we can deal with them as they come in. But yeah, we put the link in the chat for the notepad. One thing I want to start by saying is that we have a new round of data awards. So this is to help people adopt the Open Nowhere data standard. So this is creating maps of machines around the world, and it may be that there is you need a bit of support, a bit of resource to show you might have a data set, a bit of resource to go out and collect that data. You may have a very easily accessible data set, and I'm being hesitant here because they're actually quite small awards. There are a few thousand, up to a couple of $1,000, but you might also have an existing data set that you would like to have some time to adapt, or a database that could be converted into with an API to make it compatible into the Open Nowhere standard. But that's the new round, and we are taking applications until February, so please apply. You can also nominate people if you happen to know of people that have a set of data that we should be aware of. You can nominate other people, but please spread the word. There's the link, and we'll put the link in the chat as well. One of the big things that we are taking care of at the moment within the Alliance is governance. We're really trying to take care to make sure that as we grow and as we begin to register foundations for the Alliance that will help us sort of manage resources and employ the team and so on in different countries around the world, but we want to make sure that the governance of the Alliance is acceptable to everyone, that it's open and democratic and transparent. So the governance task force has been working on that, taking it forward, and they have another meeting on Tuesday next week if you'd like to come along and get involved in that. Another brief update about a different working group we've got. We had a meeting yesterday with the Open Nowhere working group, and a brief readout from that is that essentially the Open Nowhere consists of an initiative around the mapping of the world's machines, a data standard, but then also the systems needed, the tools and systems needed to support the map of machines. So what we're going to be doing over the course of this year is beginning to separate out those things and invest in them as separate things, to understand them differently, because as these things have been growing, we've been the label that we've applied to them, Open Nowhere, it can confuse. You know, there's lots of things under that one label, and we're beginning to separate them out, as we have been doing with open know-how as well. And then some quick things I want to flag up, which are that the Internet of Production Alliance will be participating in Republica this year. And there is a call for sessions out at Republica. This is Europe's largest media, internet, culture conference. It takes place in Berlin at the beginning of June. And I know the Global Innovation Gathering has a big program of activity there, and a makerspace. They operate in Republica. So do come along to that. It's a great conference. If you could go back again, the distributed design book it also has, the latest edition of the book has a call for papers out at the moment. The Internet of Production Alliance will be, we are proposing an abstract and hopefully writing a paper about open know-how. We have been successful at securing sessions for 2 panels at the International Association for the Study of the Commons, which will be taking place in Nairobi in the middle of June. And at least one of the sessions will be around open hardware. And we're looking at sort of open governance issues for the other session. We haven't finalized the brief for the second session. And then the other thing that's happening, these aren't in chronological order, the OSHWA conference, the Open Source Hardware Association, has a conference in New York and online on the 28th and 29th of April, I believe, and that you know, there'll be members of the Internet of Production Alliance taking part in that in person and online. So those are a few things that are currently, there are open calls out for, you know, participation encouraged, and the IOPA, the Internet of Production Alliance, will be represented there. Now, the one thing we wanted to flag up is that the Future of Making is taking place, an event that's taking place in Hamburg on the 3rd and 4th of March. And this is supported by the Interfacer project, which brings together Fab City Hamburg, a university institute called Hy-Vee, a software company called Dyne.org. And it's a European project that is helping to do very similar things to the agendas of the Alliance members. And it's a really fabulous team of people that have come together. So they're organizing a conference called the Future of Making, and we are hoping to have a gathering. We are planning to have a gathering for the Alliance on the 1st and 2nd of March and the 2 days preceding that, and potentially combining it or aligning it with a simultaneous potential event for the Fab City Foundation and Fab City Hamburg on digital infrastructures. I mean, we came up with the idea together. We're just trying to figure out how we can get everyone into the same space efficiently, and it's literally a question of the venue. So I would, it would be great if we can get people to Hamburg at the very beginning of March. I know it's only 6-7 weeks ago. 6-7 weeks away. There may be some travel support available from us or from the Interfacer project. That's something we could look into if you're interested in attending. And that's going to be a big part of what we'll be doing over the next 3 months. Now, is there anything else anyone would like to add? Anything else anyone wants to say? Any questions on any of that? Cool. So if we go on to the next presentation. Oh, yeah, we'll talk a little bit now about the MAKE project. And this is a project called African European Maker Innovation Ecosystem. It's about tying together makerspaces in Africa and Europe. It's a 3-year project, and it's been led by Jessica, who was welcome to the team in the previous community call. So Jessica, maybe you can kick off your presentation now. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Andrew, and hi, everybody. So yes, I will present you today the project MAKE. The project MAKE is funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. It started in February 2022 and will run until January 2025. So what is MAKE? I think we are a bit ahead for the slides. Yes, you can go maybe just one previous one. I don't know, Sarah. But I will continue. So what is MAKE? Just quickly, I'm Jessica. I recently joined the International Production Alliance, as Andrew mentioned, and I'm working on the MAKE as project lead for the Internet of Production Alliance. So what is MAKE? MAKE is a transdisciplinary approach to connect European and African makerspaces. The idea is to provide makerspaces, entrepreneurial makers, SMEs and startups with educational resources and access to network and new open standard and tools. It will also enable them to build sustainable businesses, to train their members on digital skills, to create new revenue streams and networks of local smart production, and to encourage cooperation for global collaboration networks. So now we'll present the MAKE Consortium. The MAKE Consortium is an equal mix of partners from Africa and Europe. We are a team of experts in impact investment and social venture building, open technology for distributed local smart manufacturing. MAKE creates the opportunity to unite makerspaces networks in Europe and Africa as a network of networks. The blue dots you see on the map shows where we are located in our respective organizations. There's many of our partners here on the call today, so I invite you to please introduce yourself in the chat and in the pad. So why makerspaces? So first, a makerspace is a place where digital prototyping, design, fabrication, and smart manufacturing take place. MAKE has chosen to work with makerspaces because of the important and growing role they play in digital innovation ecosystem, particularly in Africa, where manufacturing has been identified as a critical growth area to bring more jobs. One of the MAKE objectives is to enable decentralized local manufacturing to create new local value chains and business models. I will just give an example quickly. The pandemic, for example, COVID-19 demonstrated the potential for makerspaces to mobilize digital innovation in response to crises. For example, for the local production of PPE equipment for health and care sectors in various countries. One important note on the benefits of a decentralized manufacturing system is that keeping goods and materials local saves time and resources. So we'll talk now about our vision. The MAKE vision is that by 2025, we have the ambition that over 70% of makerspaces across Africa and Europe are networked amongst each other and linked in a collaborative and economically fruitful way with SMEs, corporations, investors, local governments, and other ecosystems actors. So we present now the MAKE concept. How do we do that? The core concept of MAKE is to equip African and European hardware makerspaces and their members with relevant skills, infrastructures, and regulation in order to support local businesses in implementing local digital innovations. The goal is to help them to collaborate and scale up to become financially sustainable. So there's 4 key areas identified within the MAKE concept. Each part are led by different consortium members who work on specific work packages. So yes, so as I said, few are on the call today and few are working on different parts of the make concept and the different part of the work packages. So we have policy innovation and network building. The objective is to develop a common policy agenda for makerspaces in Africa and Europe and strengthen links between African makerspaces, governments, and international networks and innovation frameworks. Then we have business models and venture building. So the objective is to support the development of sustainable entrepreneurial ventures and demonstrate that they can be for profit and for purpose, with the access of an open catalog of business models and matchmaking opportunities. At the IOPA, we lead the technical innovation part, and I will go more into detail on the next slide. But the objective here is to enable makerspaces to form a distributed manufacturing network by sharing skills, machinery, and contracts. So we need to develop new open standards that would lead to the Maker Passport, map of machinery, which is the mapping of the geographic location of machines, and develop a prototype of a digital contracting system. The other part, capacity and skill building. So the objectives are to enable the capacity development of makerspaces themselves with an open resource toolkit, dedicated courses and trainings, and a MOOC platform with educational resources. So what we work on at the IOP, so as I mentioned previously, we are the leads on the technical innovation part, but also on the business model on the work package one. Anna, I'm not sure if Anna is here, I haven't seen, but Anna is leading the open catalog of business models to provide examples and inspiration to hubs, entrepreneurs, small enterprises, startups, makerspaces on how to design their own businesses to be profitable and for purpose. And
Hi,
Anna,
Jessica. I am here.
Hi.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for introducing the info. And this might be a good time to just mention that there's going to be a webinar on that next week as well, on the 18th. I'll pop a link about that in the chat if anyone's interested.
Yes, thank you, Anna. I've added it to my slide actually.
Ah, okay. Yes. You're ahead of me. Sorry.
And we also work, so as I said, on the technical innovation with the distributed manufacturing networks on the work package 4, which is divided in 3 work streams. We have skills, from the development of a mutual recognition standard to the implementation of a Maker Passport prototype. A working group is convened to work voluntarily on the standard and the passport. The work will be presented more in detail just after me by Sarah Hutton, our research and community engagement lead. Map of machinery. So the task is mapping of machinery in and near makerspaces across Africa and Europe using the Open Nowhere standard. And contracting, a distributed contracting system prototype will be developed to enable testing with a decentralized manufacturing system. So we can see how makerspaces from Europe and Africa can be part of a new production model. What's next? So just next slide. So yes, so we are a year in already. The first step of the project was mapping and analysis, including collection of relevant business models, collection of case studies for policy agendas, and creation of focus groups. Now we are just entering the phase 2, which is co-creation of contents and deliverables. Testing, review, and verification will come next. Tool and knowledge products will be reviewed and tested by the Maker and Makerspaces community through open and dedicated feedback processes. Later on, trainings in makerspaces across Africa will be held, and the tools created, such as the Maker Passport, the contracting system, and the map of machinery will be implemented. And the final stage of the project will focus on exploitation of results by stakeholders and network partners. As I said, please do not miss on January 18th, yes, Anna, at 1 p.m. UTC, the webinar on business model for local production. This webinar is the first of a series of webinars of the MEC project, and this one is in partnership with GIG and Manufacturing Change. The focus will be on consultancy as an element of the business model for makerspaces. The link to register will be added to the chat. I can add it quickly also here. Yes. And thank you. Would you have, if you have any questions, please feel free. Thank you.
Any questions for Jessica? Thank you very much, Jessica. You might want to wonder why this is focused on Africa and Europe. Well, it's because the funding is focused. It's European Commission funding that is bringing together what they call digital innovation hubs between Africa and Europe. But what we're trying to do at the Internet of Production Alliance is use this as a way to more quickly advance and to test some of the open digital infrastructures that we're working on at the Internet of Production Alliance as a community. So on that point, you'll be hearing shortly from Sarah, unless there's any other questions. Great. Well, Jessica is working with the Alliance 3, hopefully 4 days a week, depending on how the funding goes. And it's based in Copenhagen. So if you do want to have a conversation with Jessica, if you've got, actually, you know, one of the things we want to try and do is put together a database of an relatively up-to-date database of makerspaces across Europe and Africa, people that we can reach out to. So within the consortium, we have lots and lots and lots of contacts already, of course. But one of the things that we're interested in is hearing about any WhatsApp groups that might exist in different countries, because I think there's often sort of WhatsApp groups of makerspace leaders. I have to say, most of my experience with national groups of makerspaces comes from the US, from the, groups like Nation of Makers and the Fab Foundation globally as well. So a lot of the other makerspace networks tend to be a bit more informal, but we're looking to try and map the machines in as many of them as possible. That's one of the big things that the Jessica and the Make project is going to be doing during 2023. The other big thing that we're going to be doing in 2023, if there's no questions, is developing a people and skills standard and what we're calling a maker passport. And we've delighted, we've got Sarah Hutton on the team. Sarah has 2 roles for us. She helps us to develop the Alliance community, but is also working on the people and skills standards. And so at this point, I'm going to hand over to Sarah for her presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. So again, Sarah Hutton. I'm the research and community engagement lead with the focus on leading the preliminary research and initiative to develop the people and skills standard. Also, several of you I've been in touch with in wearing my community engagement hat. One of the other things I'm really keen to do is to help to cross-thread different organizations that are focused on open science and open source hardware So I've already connected with groups like OSHWA, GOSH, Open Toolchain. We're looking to be able to integrate our community platforms a bit more. So if anybody, just want to make mention, if there's anybody on the call who is involved in supporting community engagement for their organization or knows somebody, feel free to have them get in touch with me. As a librarian in my former life, and still it's a thing, I'm all about interconnecting things and creating ecosystems as opposed to building new and separated repositories. One of the reasons why I joined the IOP is that we're looking at decentralizing and updating a system to make it more equitable and accessible for a global community. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here and talk a little bit about the People and Skills Standard just generally. So generally, from the position of the Internet of Production Alliance, the central goal of this work is to create a standard, a technical standard that is in alignment with some of the work that's already been done so far as open know-how and open know-where are concerned, to identify what are the skills and experiences that makers carry with them and that would serve as identifiers or qualifiers, and in this case specifically for a digital maker passport. And so you can think about this, we call it people and skills because it is who you are as a maker, what experiences you have, the organizations with which you are affiliated, and then the specific skills, either with machinery or a type of work or with a type of organization. But I'll get into a little bit more detail about that in a moment. This is definitely a much broader overview for a more mixed audience. So just to reiterate, following up on what Jessica was presenting as a part of the MAKE Consortium project, the work that I am doing specifically falls within Work Package 4, which is the data standard and maker passport. And so while the work of the developing a people and skills standard is intended to serve a global community and persist beyond the MAKE project, the most immediate use case is for MAKE. And so as I talk about some of the research that I have conducted and collaborated on thus far, it is of note that most of the semi-structured interviews, conversations, and document analysis that has been done is focused on makers and maker spaces and organizations that are located in Africa and Europe, because that's the most immediate use case. So this is where I'm going to spend the most time to basically explain how this process works. And so when considering a passport and not knowing, who is in the room and what experience you might have with micro-credentialing or digital badging, just to provide a visual overview of what we're looking to do here and how this system could potentially work. When we talk about a digital passport, fundamentally, we're looking at something that a maker can hold in their hand, and where, the personas that we're working with are nomadic makers, or those folks who travel between nodes, either because they don't have the resources they need to build a thing in their own space, or they don't have any resources. And so we need to be able to identify, as Jessica was mentioning, mapping out different spaces and what machinery exists, and what production can be done in the spaces. But then we need to identify what qualifies the maker to be able to enter that space and use the equipment. And so this visualization that I have constructed here is based conceptually on the Open Badges 2.0 standard. It's fairly well recognized from IMS the Global Learning Consortium. And for those of you who teach or already use badging or micro-credentialing systems in your maker spaces, this type of workflow is familiar, where you have the issuers of any badge, or basically the digital credential, and that could be an organization or a specific makerspace or an accrediting body. And then you have the actual content of what is it that people are learning to do in order to earn the badge? And beyond that, you earn the badge, and the earners in this case, as a part of this people and skills standard, the digital passport, would be the individual makers. We're looking at every step of this process and of this workflow, from what it is that the makers need to learn how to do, how they are going to receive certification, who stores or hosts those certifications, how they're displayed. Again, I have this vision of it'll be a QR code that could be scanned, but also could be a piece of paper. It's really dependent on the groups that we're working with. And then we're looking at 2 distinct points of verification, where it's looking at the credentials, or basically the skills that the makers bring with them into the spaces, and their identity. And while I could go into much deeper technical dive on this, I've only made indication of it briefly in this slide, where when we talk about credentials, what do we mean by that? There are several different types of digital badging platforms and standards, and that is a part of the work. That is a part of the people and skills work that I'll talk a little bit more about how this research is going to move forward. We could select from many different digital badging platforms. So far as maker identity is concerned, there are many different methods for authentication that are used very commonly in education or in social media platforms. And that's what this research is all about, is figuring out what are the most commonly used amongst the spaces and the people interviewed, and what do they need to know in order to be able to move between these maker spaces, and then what are we going to use to credential them? So that's all a part of this work. It's rather large, but very doable. So to be a little more specific about how this is being approached, again, the target audience, or the problem that we're looking to solve for, are these nomadic makers. And so that could be entrepreneurs, engineers, designers, artists, anybody who produces something. And essentially the critical questions that we're asking as a part of the preliminary research is, and part of what we're going to be asking you today as a part of the open discussion forum, is why create a digital maker passport? What utility does it provide to you as a maker or as a makerspace leader? Like, why would you need this? I've had a lot of these conversations already, and I'll talk a little bit about what the findings have been thus far, but we want to hear from you too, as much information gathering as possible. Looking at the who, developing a persona, we've done that so far as looking at the mobile maker, and there's a lot of research that has been conducted under the umbrella of the European Commission's Horizon 2020 and mobility schemas for makers. And I've interviewed some of those folks and talked to them about, their distinct needs so far as, infrastructure support and equipment and whatnot are concerned. But there's also the other component beyond the persona of, what organizations might makers be affiliated with? Are they part of a larger consortia? Like, these are questions that we're asking as a part of the research. And also that includes the authentication, identity verification as a part of that visualization that I shared. And then the what. The what is probably the biggest chunk of this right now. There are a few pre-existing, but very minimal number pre-existing digital maker passport programs that are in alignment with what we're envisioning to do. And then I've had conversations with a lot of these folks. I'm going to highlight the MAP, the Maker Access Pass digital passport program that's used at the University of Wyoming. Shout out to Tyler Kerr when you're watching this recording. So one of the ways in which they have developed their program is that it focuses a lot on the training that goes with it. You need to be able to assess your community, determine what is it that they need to know, and then build out that educational program. And then you issue the badge. The badge, it's not an afterthought. We're going to be designing the, the tooling and infrastructure for this along the way. But the what is really the critical piece. And just to make mention of, Jessica would be the best person to to answer any questions about specific timelines. But a part of the MAKE project is that once we identify, you know, this people and skills standard and, you know, a way to move forward to design the digital passport, they have a stage where they have educators that'll be working on designing the curriculum and the training programs that accompany it, because that's a huge part of all of this. And please correct me if I'm mistaken, Jessica, I believe that's an overlapping swim lane in the project. And then, of course, there's the how. And I won't get into too much detail because it's very, very complex. And believe me, there's a lot, there are a lot of conversations to be had about identity verification, and also that credential verification process. But what I want to do is to focus on more along the lines of the timeline and what comes next and what the ask is for the community. And so, as Jessica was stating for the MIG project, you know, it's about a year in, and the people and skills work is a couple of months in at this point. So we're in January 2023 right now. What has been conducted so far is a significant amount of desk research, document analysis, and many semi-structured interviews. And glad to talk to anybody about research methodology at some point if that's your jam, but I'll focus on the outputs. So the conversations preliminarily with makers have been to identify how do we shape additional research to gather more data. And so the outcome from the semi-structured interviews so far is that I've identified a handful of significantly mature maker passport models. Like I mentioned, there's the MAP at University of Wyoming's workshop, and there's also MIT's Mobius, where we'll be talking in depth with their system architect, Project Mobius, about how that was developed. However, both of those aforementioned systems really only focus on one campus. And so we're still looking at a broader project here. We've identified the systems, we've identified categorically what. And so what skills need to be trained. And so we've got categorically what makerspaces typically focus on when they're granting access to people in their spaces. And that's just in brief categories like safety and training procedures, any sort of health protocol information you have to fill out, insurance, and then categorized by like woodworking, CNC machine, or, like that. So glad to share that at any other point. The stage that we're in right now is between January and March, and it's really looking at taking the research that's been conducted thus far and moving into the development phase. And that is where I'm going to, move into the what comes next section. But just want to show here that this is what we're looking at so far as a production of a V1 of a people and skills standard is concerned. We're looking at June 2023. That's all to state that it's a version 1. It's something to work with that'll be integrated into the MAKE project and carried on by the community, long after that version 1 has been published. So in brief, what comes next so far as people and skills is concerned is establishing a working group. And so there are a couple of different work streams here, and this is part of what we want to discuss in the open conversation, open discussion section of the community call, is that there are multiple work streams involved. There's the actual writing of the standard. And if you have experience with, metadata standards, you're a software engineer, you're a maker, there are many different ways you could be involved in, helping to author this standard and to contribute. There's literature review, there's, conducting additional outreach and interviews, many different ways to be involved, which is what we'd like to talk about, because fundamentally the work that we're doing in people and skills, as well as any of the standards that we support in the IOP, are for the community and by the community. So it's really important to get folks involved in the discussion. So with that being said, I'm going to move into the open discussion, putting that link back up there, and I'll stop doing the screen share shortly so we can see each other and have that dialogue. Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, just to say thank you for the presentation, Sarah, and you know, I'm really glad to see that we're going to be making progress so quickly over the course of the next few months. Good luck on that. I think as we wait for any comments or discussion questions, there's a couple of things to say. That the phrase "maker passport" and the focus on makerspaces and what you've just heard is there because of the MAKE project. And there's, you know, the Internet of Production Alliance, when we were created in the summer of 2019, we realized that there were going to be, you know, families of data standards that needed to be able to distribute and decentralize production, one of which was going to be people and skills. And the MAKE project has brought focus to some of that activity. I think because of where we've come from as an alliance, rather than trying to go out there and understand all of the world's technology education, further education, higher education, we've processes and certifications and so on, we've really just looked at maker education. So I think originally the people and skills standard was going to be focused on maker skills, and there have been ideas, and we've had some engagement with maker access control system, makerspace access control systems, makerspace management systems. But really, the purpose, the main focus, as Jessica said, for the MAKE project is to try and build economically active networks. So, you know, in the MAKE project, it is the members of the makerspaces in Africa and Europe who have maker passports that will be connected to the Internet of Production, that we will be able to distribute contracts to make things so that they can get paid. And that's, you know, that's brought the focus into the people and skills standard that you've just heard. It is not, in fact, a passport. It will, do not try to use this at passport control when you cross from one country into another. We hope that it will bring some sort of recognition, formalized recognition or mutual recognition to what is currently informal, largely informal education processes in a lot of the world's makerspaces. Yeah, it's, you know, the UK Border Control Agency is not going to be impressed if you say, but I have a maker passport. It's just people like that name because it's about trying to encourage maker mobility and be able to work on lots of different projects. Okay, any questions? Yes, well done, Sandra. Not yet. It would solve a lot of problems, I think, for a lot of our communities if it did become an actual passport, but like a diplomatic passport one day. Any questions before we head into the discussion?
I haven't seen anything in the chat nor in the pad. However, Sarah, I see that you had prepared like a material for this discussion. Do you want me to go into the pad and ask those questions, or do you want to lead that?
Oh, sure. I mean, either way, I can go ahead and do that. Because we did, you know, I have some questions and, you know, in conversation with Jessica as well, and in what would lend to the most immediate use case for the people and skills standard, wanted to ask of the group today, you know, I guess starting with that first preliminary question, the existential one, of why a digital passport? How would you use a maker passport? Or how would you envision somebody using a maker passport? And I invite folks to type questions either directly into that document or feel free to unmute and just speak up. If you feel more comfortable raising the hand. Oh, I see a hand. Yeah, go for it. Harris?
Yeah, Harris.
Yes.
Well, Sarah, we met yesterday. I would like to press a bit, although I'm not going to be too creative, I would like to press a bit the existential question, because, I mean, can't the, so, I mean, the way, for example, in the forum, in the IOPA forum,
Mm.
people just meet and there's the introduction section, which is a lot more informal.
Mm.
Passports, by their own, but like, for example, okay, I don't know how, I want to keep it short. It seems more LinkedIn and corporate culture than something that springs from the ground up among friends. Does that make sense?
That does make a lot of sense. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the reasons why I like to focus so much on the what as opposed to the who. I mean, the who, and tying it to whether, you're looking at whatever authentication you're looking at. And the most typical would be the OAPH 2, or I might be getting that wrong right now, but the what is the most critical, because it's really, in the conversations I've had so far, a lot of it has to do with safety. A lot of it has to do with not just safety around machinery and making sure you don't, let's be frank, like lose a finger or something, or really severely injure yourself. It's, getting a sense of what types of equipment are there and like what are the risks, what are the different health and safety protocols, but also safety, personal safety. A lot of these spaces that we're working with, and a lot of the conversations that we have, and I'll use, Open Nowhere and the mapping of spaces and that discussion of geolocation of space and equipment and people as being one that is very sensitive, has a lot to do with safety, has a lot to do with privacy. And this is a part of it too. If you're going to be having somebody come into your space, it's important to know, who they are, what affiliations they might have, and also, credentials, whether formal or informal. As Andrew was mentioning, a lot of this work is looking to be able to recognize very informal training. And that's a lot of the conversations I've had with spaces thus far. They have very concrete training programs developed, but they're not out there anywhere. It's like, it's on an internal spreadsheet or, something like that. So that is all to state that while I do recognize, there could be a tension there, we're being very careful to ensure that that isn't the direction that it goes in, because it really is to provide support and infrastructure for pre-existing systems, not to pull them into a pre-existing corporate model. I hope that answers.
It's supposed to be a data standard.
Yeah.
And then the passport is an attempt and a way to test the data standard through the MAKE project.
Just a way to test. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Did you have some questions you'd like to ask us, Sarah, then, for the discussion?
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 10 minutes left. We're going to end on time today.
Yeah.
GMT.
So for those who may be interested in engaging this work, this is a question I have with two hats on, leading the People and Skills initiative, but also as community, on the community engagement aspect of it. What would be some of the best ways to engage on this for folks? We have our pre-existing models of, working groups to support different work streams. We have, community calls and different events. We've talked about putting together an additional community of practice for people who are interested in discussing, whether it be the digital passport or, the People and Skills standard. What are some of the most effective ways you have found to connect and work collaboratively?
I'm gonna have to say it, I'm afraid. Face-to-face meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really miss face-to-face meetings myself. But I think what we'll try to do is make sure that we can, as an alliance, progress this particular initiative at gatherings like Nation of Makers in the US, or the Fab Foundation conferences, and Maker Fairs. I know Antonio is looking at talking about some of the standards at the Maker Faire in Mexico.
Yes. And Antonio, you'd had your hand raised a moment ago.
Yes,
Right.
I wanted to mention that one way that I see a huge potential for the Maker Passport to help is so as a nomadic maker going to a new country, find the ecosystem and have access to the resources, not just to the machines, but also to the network, and to the people, to have the trust from them is without documents, and it's very difficult. And as an example, last year I was in Turkey, and because of the language barrier, so we have like a huge difficulty trying to find out how do someone that comes from other country can have access to the machines when they are part of a public institution. So we spend a few hours trying to understand each other, like how the Fab Academy, Fab Lab network works, and to try to converge in ways to work together and for me to have access to machines. But by having a written document, that was make things easier. Also, by also being part of and having an agreement of accepting the passports, also make things quicker. And so I think that's the potential it has right now, that to make these connections between people and networks more easier and more formalized also, because huge of these things happen, like someone mentioned, like between friends. And so that's to mention one case. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That's perfect. And that's exactly the kind of information that is being sought, because we have, you know, the technical direction, and we have consortia who are willing to test. I mean, aside from Make, we have other makerspace consortia that will test anything that's developed, but it's really about the what. Barbara.
Yeah, though I have easy access to the team. So if anyone else has a question, or else I have a question or vision that I kind of want to get people's idea on. No one else? Okay. I'm sorry, there's a lot of background noise. I hope that's okay. So we're talking about developing a mutual recognition standard and then applying that within a Maker Passport, who might take who knows what shape and form. But I did have this thought that in terms of sustainability of, you know, the standard being applied to people where they already are. And this is what Harris was maybe mentioning in a way, which is you already have platforms on which people are used to recognizing each other's skills. The top one that I think of is LinkedIn. So am I right to think that a standard of this kind could enable a series of maker spaces to agree on what a badge on LinkedIn, like, you know, the certification elements that you have on LinkedIn, and then have that be a vehicle for applying the standard effectively to people and having that identity check like that. That's what I understand of the kind of way that such a standard could be applied beyond the experiment of Make. Because I see Make as a sandbox in which we try out, like, what should this look like? But it is very likely or even possible that what we create and Make isn't actually what then lives on, but that it gives the sandbox place in which we prototype what things should look like down the line.
That's absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why I was very intentional about framing that visualization as one that's in alignment with how micro-credentialing and badging works in general, because it really is about coming to that agreement of what does this badge mean? When I see this, what are the expectations? And getting groups to come to an agreement on that. And I mean, and that's how that ends up working. And in a lot of ways, like regardless of whether or not it's recognized by LinkedIn, if you're using something like Badger, you know, that technically speaking is interoperable with many different platforms. And so it's less about the technology, is it's more about coming to the agreement on what it means. And it's something that would have a lifelong beyond, and broader applicability beyond the Make project, or some of the, you know, consortia that I've been working with in the US. I see there's another question. We have 3 minutes left in the call. I want to make sure we have time to wrap and do a reminder.
Sandra asked a question,
Yeah.
I can see.
Yeah.
Sandra, you want to ask your question out loud if you have your mic?
Yeah.
It's more like a comment for further consideration. I think it's not necessary. I also have very easy access to the team in the Make project, and probably also in some live events in the coming months. So just consideration. And for collaboration outside of these live events, I really like to have like one document where it's easy to grasp, like, I don't know, reading not 200 pages, and then being able to add notes and add brainstorming and add comments, and also have calls around them after being able to read this document and writing a few notes so that you can discuss any comments people have in a live call.
Great. So just a quick question then for you, because everybody has these questions about how best to host. And so we have, you know, our Discourse Community Forum with where we have implemented the wiki functionality so that it can be kind of like that one page and, you know, that shared conversation. But there are multiple other platforms that are available and that are, you know, more in alignment with someone's native environment. When you're thinking like a one page, you know, what is your typical go-to?
I think anything would work, like a pad, like you set up, but also the discourse forum. It's more structured. Like it depends, is it just the first brainstorming, or is it then going into more details and then something where you can vote and where you can discuss specific questions? I think it's great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sandra. And thanks everyone for joining the call today. Makerpassport.org is not our domain name as such. It is a domain name of an Alliance member, MakerNet, put together by Pierre Alexis. And so credit to him as well on some of the language that we're using here today. But I just want to say a big thank you to Sarah. Thanks for the beginning of a discussion here. We're working on it for the next few months. You've seen the process. Do engage with us. We are very easy to engage with, I would hope, although my email inbox does hurt sometimes. And the next community call is a good way to engage with us. It'll be on February the 8th. And the focus of our next call will be around the results of our research into and scoping into a data standard or a standard for electronic components. So we will be having some guest speakers from Kitspace, Casper Emanuel and his team, who'll be presenting some of the work that they've done and the research report that they've published around how we support electronic components and distributed manufacturing around the world. If you have any questions, do get in touch with the team, write them on the pad. We'll get back in touch with you. Thank you very much for joining this month, and we'll see you hopefully on February the 8th. Have a great start to the year, everyone. Thank you and bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.